venturing out of a nice warm climate into the cold of a Schenectady winter, Marquetta Goodwine, who has credentials in computer science. She's an actual computer scientist and a mathematician. And these subjects would be quite at home here at Hindley College, of course, but we've asked her to come and talk about what I think is probably the work of her heart. And that is working for cultural continuation and planning for the environment. She is the founder of the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition, which is a group that works to connect people of the Gullah Geechee Nation with their heritage and enlist their support and their voice in protecting that heritage too, the natural heritage of the Sea Islands off of Georgia and South Carolina. And she also, the coalition also works to ensure that diverse groups enjoy the outdoors too, which is one of the things that appealed to us here at the Kelly Adirondack Center. And she's going to talk about bring her talents as not only as an environmentalist, but also as an artist and a political activist into the mix. She has been active a lot all over the world, and in fact spoke on behalf of the Gullah Geechee Nation in front of the United Nations in Geneva a couple of years ago. So she has many, many awards and accolades and expressions of respect. You can read those in the little biography we have at the back. But I think probably the one that she's proudest of is having been elected the chiefess and head of state of the Gullah Geechee Nation. So would you please rise, in accordance with protocol, to welcome Queen Quet of the Gullah Geechee Nation.
Baby, first get in. See that shit. Short. show. Said, tell my son, at this store, when I call, who's what right now? And she went with it. I walked so. And then, what? Yeah, no, see. They haven't get nothing. Not sure anything downtown. They change up everything. They bring over in the belly of peace. Whip it up. Change up all of that. You know, great. After we finish, boy, we had that coffee. Had that rhythm, like that water thing where we were lit cross, that middle passage in the land, where we were dead. Plenty of time to dead. People be kind. Then I know we done. Then I know what we did. And I sure not taking the time. I sit upon the shore and read. And everybody we done. And we asked us to remember now. Everybody we done. And what had happened from the rest I know and forget it. And Chipra. Or how I everybody now called Carolina. I see. And the more I repeat me. Yeah, I mean on Carolina. Well, now why do we have to go to Gizi? Well, now you want. Walk on shore. Now Carolina go. See how it go. And they and thought that with all we were going to do. But they had no sick. And even the time, just like on the children day, you know, we went like that, we walked with one another. We went one day and I saw the one by the window. He didn't care what he said. We ain't been one that time, go and wash him. Remember who we done. We would know, we look at each other, we go. So the children get together in the evening time. Yeah, after that, I'm walking. And definitely, it does like this shit. You're gonna get it. In that bush, I'm gonna brush up. And I went playing behind the show. Gonna get it. And you know, see, you're quiet. They yelling at you're quiet. No one to get there. And I'm like, no, one at a time. Because if it moves at him, I will have to work it back down. And children go and make it. I'm screaming for the evening over. So for all this shit time, have plenty of people that come in. Well, don't tell you what we're there now. When that thing scream, it wasn't me scream. I drag on things like this and make them like this show. And I make the water, the wine, like this show. They found that. Water in the wine like this show. See what they say we some when they get it with a crack teeth. I see, if honey ain't from there. Honey ain't going to know the difference. Can't fail. The beef from there. They ain't going to know nothing with it. If it did, they ain't no honor the difference in there. You ain't know if you did something or you did something. If honey ain't there from there. But we don't in there. We ain't going no way. So, after a while, the children will join in for do all of this shit. They stay together. So that this shit did. And they still are kind together and things like that. They don't stand all the time. And the rhythm of thing will be more than China from back of you. What the rest of people would think say? And she would do everything like that. So he went down under the carpet and looked for me. Then I wanted to see where it ain't for snow. Because when the time you get there, I feel, well, I look for the golden people that say, water wheel. And then I said, next one when we get over here, and they said, no, hold on, for water away. And then when we get over there, they said, no, water back. This is right there. They said, we have water back. The end of we dog. But most of the people when they come in and get this shit, now I stand tall, they come to children and look to see. But then when they hear people speak like this, they go back and they say, well, I went looking for the Gullah Geechees, but I couldn't find them. Oh, you found them. But just because they're bilingual or multilingual, a lot of times people think, even when they see us, oh, that's not who I'm looking for. Because we speak like this. If women are talking like that, then you're going to look at me like a bucket, like you're going to do the water. But then when we speak like this, you don't understand the word. They look at me like I'm nuts, right? So we're like, which way do you want it? You want us to be able to communicate with you or not? You want to make sure that you can connect with my culture or not? Because for eons, people came to the Gullah Geechee Nation and didn't want us to be who we were. And now we have more coming that don't want the cultural landscape to be what it's been. So as I said to you, rivers and the coastline of the Atlantic Ocean, the Middle Passage, moves like this. It doesn't move straight in a line. But when people come into dredge, because they think what they're going to do next is the best thing to do, they don't realize that causes the water to rush in. And when the water rushes in, trust me, sands rush out. Communities end up rushing out. Culture ends up rushing out. History ends up rushing out. And then they want to come back after the fact and say, well, what do you know about that? What I knew you just took away. Because you changed what was naturally there. But one thing you can never change. Our elders always told us, well, then we mean for evil, but God mean for good. So all of these things that have been happening through and around our sea islands from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, where the Gullah Geechee culture is, you know, we the crap we like they show all the time and they look at it and they all stand. You know, I can talk like that at home and they don't mind. Yeah. You see, in these places, in these spaces, we've been able to keep that rhythm of our language the same way we kept that rhythm along with that tide that hits the coast. A couple hours a day, that tide shifts and it changes. When it goes out, it takes things, just like when it comes in, it brings. So as one of our proverbs say, the water to bring me, but the water might take me back. So you'll come to the Gullah Geechee Nation and find that along those beautiful cultural landscapes are buried our ancestors. With the Igbo, Mandinka, Maleke, Yoruba, Gola, Gizi, Mende, Temne, Fik, Ibibio, and the various other African ethnic groups that make up our culture and our traditions, our heritage. They put together their languages in the evening, in the bush hour, in the brush hour, as they gathered in a circle together. And they intertwined who they are. And so today, many people come to our land, our coast, and they say, well, they want to learn about us. But for some reason, instead of coming outside, they want to go in a building. They want to sit down in an auditorium. They want to see a screen. They want to press a kiosk button. Meanwhile, we are going, they end up in places called museums and the like. They end up in historic centers and the like. And then they wonder why everything in the place is in English. And then they wonder why they don't think they got the whole story. But then, they come out John and they like that into the bush out and praise. That's the thing that one could get in more than what the hammer can go right on the screen. But if you pass by the living institutions that we call people, to get to those places that the people build, a lot of times we never ask the right question when we get there. Well, what was there before they built that? What stood in that place? Who stood in that place? Who built that? And why did they put it where they put it? What went on before it got there? So many people who come to the Carolinas today, and Georgia and northeastern Florida, end up going right past Gullah Geechee people all day long. Never speak to us. And they go into an institution of higher learning or some other place and then ask a professor, do you know any of them? He said, of course, I did my doctoral thesis on them. They live right down the street. They live across that road over there. Didn't you just drive past? Well, I did see some people, but I didn't stop to talk to them. Well, maybe you should go back. But then people recognize your car when you come back. Now, that's why when you get there and ask where the Gullah Geechee, they tell you go over there. And so a lot of times, what we're doing today is we're missing the cultural continuation that's even along these shores. And we live right there. How many of you here drive right by the Mohawk River, but you never stop along the shoreline and find out if anybody still living there is actually of the Mohawk? How many of you read about them or waited for the documentary to come on TV, but you never stopped and said, you know what, I live right in the community with them. Maybe I need to just talk to somebody. And I know some folks have heard this statement before. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. Oh, a few people know. So I figured, when they asked me to come from the warmth of 70 degrees to come from a nice flat place so I could look out and watch a sunrise or sunset along the coast of the Atlantic, to actually bundle up and come up the mountains to higher land where there's snowfall, and where when it doesn't even fall, it blows off your river onto you. I love that. I said, well, I guess I gotta help them out because they don't know. And they did ask somebody. And that somebody happened to be me. So, okay, Lord, would you send some sunshine and melt any possibilities of ice and snow before I get there? And it's no problem to bring the natural temperatures back after I leave, but please, the night that I'm there, can we just have this agreement? They'll be as warm as you can make it without the whole world losing their mind. So, thank God, the prayers of the righteous availeth much. That the pattern here changed, the weather pattern changed, the condition changed, the climate is changing. And scientists like myself, and many of you who attend Union, probably think about that in the scientific terminology attached to this thing called climate change, the climate science, and what's going on in the environment. But the pattern of people's beliefs and what they now think is important is also changing, fortunately, for the good. And there are many who don't necessarily want to go. They're going to go kicking and screaming, but they're going. Because of the collective consciousness says we do need to get in that circle because we need to know why were these people gathering in that circle since the 1600s? How is it that their tree, even of their flag, becomes human bodies intertwined? How did that pattern come to be? And I thought about how many times people never see the color. Because so many times when we hear about Gullah Geechees nowadays, it is in a documentary, it's in a museum, that somebody is simply in a black and white photograph. So they take the color out of who we are. The same way on meditation. And they change our songs. And the patterning of the song changes the meaning of the song. The cadence of the song changes the rhythm of the song. And again, we're back to dredging. But now you dredge out in a way the real culture and the heart of the community. But when we bring it often back into institutions, people say, well, I have a right to do that. I'm an ethnomusicologist, so I just thought that I'd study it and then I do my own rendition of the song. But do you realize that something that was a funeral dirge you just made into a shout, and something that was a shout you just made into a funeral dirge? And something that you just rewrote has no meaning to the people that created it. I remember when I first heard this song, I know y'all know it. If y'all know it, sing with me. Kumbaya, Lord. If you know it, sing it with me, don't laugh. Kumbaya, Lord. Kumbaya. Kumbaya. Kumbaya, kumbaya, Lord, kumbaya, oh Lord, kumbaya. And guess what? The Anglo teacher told me in the school that that was actually a song that my ancestors had created. That's a for real. I went home, I sang it to my mother. She knew nothing of this. I said, now, I thought the lady got it backwards, and that wasn't the first or the last teacher of mine that did. But she could only teach what she was taught. I said, now, what that lady plunk on the piano, ding ding, and then told us to sing like that. Did she mean, come on? yeah, Lord, come on, yeah. Come on, yeah, Lord, come on, yeah. Come on, yeah, Lord, come on, yeah. Oh, Lord, come on, yeah. My mama said, there you go, you got it. You're cooking with hot grease. I said, okay then. I don't want to know. My mother said, I have never heard that other way you did a while ago. Please don't sing no more in this house. But this woman had been taught because someone else had rewritten it and they had studied the songs of the Sea Islands and they said, well, these songs are sung this way, especially when you use shape notes. But again, we're reshaping somebody else's culture. And then you come back into their community and then tell them, now that I've reshaped it here, this is really your stuff. But they don't recognize it. Y'all know how it is to go to a class reunion and everybody's reshaped. And you're like, oh, that's your girl, how you doing? And you walk up and say, I didn't know that was her. That's how we kind of feel when people come in and they've seen only the black and white photos. They've only heard these anglicized versions of our story, and then they reshape and they come back and they say, this is the shape that's now in, but don't you accept it as your culture? And we said, well, no, we don't. Because that's not the original pattern. Everybody wasn't in the position that many have us today, where people have actually thought they were adding to what we were doing. They actually were taking away from it. They were stripping us of the culture and the tradition. And as a part of that, with the overbuilding on the coast, they started to strip away the very environment in which that culture and that tradition has grown. And they've changed the patterns of what were Carolina rice fields and indigo fields, and where these were the places where we had our bush hours, our brush hours, our baptisms, our shouts. We have changed that into places of recreation instead of preservation and cultural continuation. And some want to come and they want to see it, and they end up going to resort areas and again bypassing us and never stopping and just tearing a new out on the porch. And then there's some, like a new friend I got this evening that came once but only got to go to the historic downtown peninsula of Charlestown and been longing to go back ever since. Kind of like me longing to get out of the cold before the snow comes. So I said, I know what I'll do. I'll not only bring a little sunshine with me in the suitcase and warm it up and melt the snow, but I'm going to also bring some of my community with me. So let's take a little journey to the Sea Islands from the Adirondack area. Let's take a little journey back down south where it's a little flat. And let's see what we got going here. So the same way, there was a man, William Stillman, who thought he'd come to this area, to the New Eden. I think it not robbery that God would have it that my engineer tonight's name is Adam. So we're right here in Eden. The Eden I'm used to, though, is the Gullah Geechee Nation, from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. And from the Sea Islands in the Atlantic to 30 to 35 miles inland is my homeland. The shorelines today look very similar to that which my ancestors would have seen in the 16, the 17, the 1800s, as enslavement vessels brought them into the Atlantic, and later bateau boats that we still make by hand would have taken them down these riverways and then ended them up on islands like my home island here, St. Helena Island. And this is Clubridge Creek. And so many creeks and streams and rivers connect back up to the Atlantic Ocean and places where people now have built bridges, not realizing that those bridges have an effect on our coastline, on our sustainability of even the very staples of our diet, like our seafood. Oysters from Daufuskie Island in the Gullah Geechee Nation in the same county, Beaufort County, world-renowned oysters. And now you are not allowed to pick oysters between Daufuskie and Hilton Head Island because of the pollution, because of the environmental degradation, because of overbuilding. But here off of St. Helena, we still have what many environmentalists call pristine waters. So members of the Gullah Geechee Fishing Association continue the traditions that our ancestors, that are often depicted from way back a yama, even in black and white, still live, like my cousin, Captain Middleton, that you see here. These photographs were done way before I was ever born, and many of us ever lived, of us going island to island, still on waters. But now we also have docks like this, where my family members can still go out and keep their traditions alive. I'm catching the crab, and then in the evening time, taking them to the yard, doing anything like that, boiling the crab, having what we call the crab crack. And so we also have the next generation being taught how you continue these traditions. How do you sew a cast net? You don't have to wait till there's a store open when you know how to make your own stuff. And this way, we still go out and harvest from the waterways as well as from the land. We're still agrarian people, and we're still seaward people. And so when we go back to the oceans and the waterways off of Sullivan's Island, and there in Amelia Island at Old Town Fernandina, we pay tribute to our ancestors still, who came in and made this a cultural landscape, who kept alive their traditions, even while those people ain't been on the stand tall. They still kept their language, their traditions, their culture, in spite of the fact that for generations, people literally and figuratively tried to beat it out of us. But we know that we be Gullah Geechee anointed people. And it is a blessing from God to be able to not only continue to have our language, our spiritual practices. The spirituals, the songs, are officially South Carolina state music now. And they recognize the fact that they were created on the Sea Islands by the enslaved Africans who have come to be known as Gullah Geechees. The world now is starting to also recognize that Africans weren't just brought here to work on plantations. They weren't brought here just to be nursemaids for other people. They weren't brought here to be entertainment for other people, but that we actually have a rich heritage in protecting our coast because we actually live in balance with the environment that we are part of. I often say to people that the waterway is our bloodline and the land is our family. And so it's a blessing to come to a place in a space, read a name like William Stillman, and think about a man named William Stillman who got folks from down there, but they were running up this way to freedom through the Underground Railroad. And to have folks from Eddystone come here to see a Sister Teresa and say to me, I didn't know that we had a queen. I didn't know the language I grew up speaking was even a language. And I said, well, where did you grow up? She said, I grew up here, but my mama was from Eddystone, Arkansas. So cultural continuation doesn't just happen in the literal place that it evolves out of the soil of. It comes from the heart, comes from the soul, comes from the mind. And when you have these things in balance and intact and aligned with all other living beings in the world and on the earth, we all have a harmony that'll make us sing together the way y'all did with Kumbaya. I don't learn y'all the right way, we do it later on. All right? But nonetheless, when we take all those different voices and put them together, we now expand the circle. And so tonight, before I get ready to go back where it's nice and warm, and before you all return to your natural habitat in the snow and the chilly weather, I will give you a chance to ask questions. Don't get too personal and you might get an answer tonight. If you have a chance to ask questions, so the circle is open, the floor is open. Yes, ma'am.
Were there queens before you, and if so, how many queens have you known about?
Well, that's very interesting the way you phrase that question, because of course there were queens before me. I mean, there are many queens in the world. But do you mean of the Gullah Geechee Nation? No, ma'am. I am the first elected head of state and queen mother for Gullah Geechees ever. Thank you. And this is now, I'm entering my third term, and we have a constitution and everything. So I am an elected head of state and a Queen Mother. So I hold a political position and a spiritual position with my people. So prior to me, there wasn't another one. And so it's really a blessing to have your people come together and say, you are the one that we want to instill with the crown. Thank you for that question. I love the way you asked it too. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a farmer.
Excellent.
I'm a farmer from Soul Fire Farm. We're really focused on empowering other Black, Latino, and Indigenous.
Here's some clapping over there. We got some other Soul Fire people up in there. Is that what the clap was? Y'all heard Soul Fire? Yes.
Yeah, we're working really hard to reclaim our Indigenous and ancestral sustainable farming practices, and I wonder if you could speak to some of the ways that you care for land and water, what kind of crops you grow, and how you keep the soil alive in your nation.
Absolutely. First of all, where is your farm? How far are we from it?
We're about an hour east of here.
About an hour east of here, okay. So one of the things that we do, of course, is we try to do what people call mitigate the damage, right? First of all, when we harvest from land or from water, we don't do what I learned in Texas at a fisherman's exchange, which is derby fishing. So we don't derby farm either, where you should rotate your land. Don't just keep exhausting that one plot year after year after year. We also don't plant based on what the industry wants to buy, because that's what a lot of USDA pushes, right? Whatever the industry wants to buy, or whatever we can actually tell you grow, but we're going to have you plow most of it back under the ground and just give you a subsidy, right? That's what they do. We don't do that. We grow what sustains the people, and also what can then be put on that land as a cover crop in between when you're rotating, okay? So today we still grow a lot of what my ancestors grew. Every year my family and I plant at least 1 acre of food in the middle of our family compound. And everybody, grandma always wants something to eat. All right, so what we have is okra, tomatoes, watermelon, cucumbers, cantaloupes, peanuts. We also grow a great deal of peanuts, a lot of different greens depending on the season of the year. We also grow sweet potatoes. And so again, with the different seasonal crops, of course, we rotate them out. We have a lot of other Gullah Geechee farmers now growing broccoli. And a lot of them growing the greens and the broccoli, so it's also cut up and taken into the schools. Now, we have a combination of farmers. We have traditionalist farmers, which a lot of other people call organic farmers. Okay, and yes, and then we have commercial farmers, or the ones who are connected to the USDA programs for farmers. So the ones who are oftentimes connected to the USDA programs, of course, they use nitrates and other things to fertilize, because they need these things to grow a certain way, look a certain way, for them to be marketable. Wherein, if you grow just naturally, of course, we don't let negative people in our fields. I'm touching that now. Yes, ma'am? The lady who wants to run away.
I'm wondering about the traditional crops of rice and indigo. Are those still farmed down there? For local use or commercial?
Not for local use, for commercial use, but in a very interesting way. Carolina gold rice and indigo are grown now for tourists. That's what they're grown for. Because the Department of Health and Environmental Control won't give permits now for you to grow rice in mass quantities like it once was grown. Because in order to grow rice, you also have to have stagnant water. So the mosquito population now with these new viruses, right, they really don't want a bunch of water just sitting around, so it won't give you the permit. But they're allowed for so-called educational use, and some people have made that a marketing tool, because then they'll say, we're growing it for educational use, but then we bag it and we're now selling it. And so now they sell it to the tourists, and they say, well, but every bag donates a certain amount to this particular nonprofit or that nonprofit. So it's really interesting. And the indigo is sort of the same thing. We've had people who move to where we are start to want to regrow indigo so they can make fabrics and things like that to sell to tourists, or they can make batiks, and then they can go and be in museums and things with these designs, but not for us who are the natives. Has nothing to do with the natives. And so it's really interesting to us, this dynamic. Something that has really been one of the most horrific things our people survived like chattel enslavement being used sort of as a tourism hook now. And so cotton, the same thing. You don't find cotton grown on the Sea Islands now, unless someone now says, well, at this particular historic site, we're growing a few rows so that when visitors come, they see it. My mother says she'll never pick another piece of cotton as long as she lived for the amount that she has picked. I will go to certain places and pick cotton so that I always have it, so young students do know what it looks like, real cotton, not Q-tip brand, okay? And so they know it grows, it doesn't just come in a box in the store. But a lot of people associate all of these things with pain, but rice is still a major staple. We eat rice breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But the Gullah Geechee Nation isn't profiting from the rice that's even grown in the very few limited places that's grown where we are. Yeah, so that's a dynamic that is still shifting. It's a pattern we're trying to get to change. Yeah. Thoughts of your hand?
I'm Adam Stewart. And throughout your presentation, you were revealing some of your culture to us. Can you tell us, some of the stuff you have on and
It's a dress. This is a dress. No, that's one of them. Can you tell me some of the stuff you got on? So we ain't gonna go no further than that. Yes, it's I love these ladies. They get it every time. But yes, some of the things that I have on, like you'll see that I have these bracelets on. I have worn these bracelets probably for the past 2 decades. And they've only grown in the amount because they have been given to me from different parts of the Gullah Geechee Nation. People have made them, but many of them come directly from different countries in the motherland that people have specifically brought to me. The oldest of which is this one, which is over 100 years old, which is from Benin women of power. And so I've been presented these things as gifts because so many of our family of the African diaspora and of the motherland respect me for keeping our traditions alive. I also wear them because that sound makes me never forget what my ancestors went through when they heard that sound. I can wear these willingly. When they heard that sound, it wasn't necessarily willingly. Okay, it makes the same sound. I've had shackles on. In fact, at my installment, I was shackled on Sullivan's Island. And Sullivan's Island is where over 40% of all Africans enslaved in North America came through. And when I came out and the drums and the incense and everything was ahead of me, one woman, I can barely remember anybody else except this woman, when I learned what throngs of people meant was that day. Just knowing there were people everywhere. And I can remember trying to make sure I wouldn't step on this man and lay down on the ground in front of me to take a picture. He wanted this picture at this certain angle so bad. And as I stepped, he rolled out the way because there was nowhere else for me to go. And the next thing I do remember is when we got in the center of the circle, one woman said, "Let her go." And when she said, "Let her go," a whole bunch of people started chanting, "Let her go." And when I dropped to my knees, no one had to come unshackle me. The shackles fell off on their own, where they had to shackle me going in. So every day that I hear or I look at these, I also reminded of that time, that moment, in that space, and how my ancestors came in that space chained together. All of the jewelry that you see me wear has different meanings to it, whether it's arms, which are the key of life, the map of Africa, the cowrie shells, which are the first forms of money. They represent prosperity and vision. And so I don't wear things. The first time I'm ever wearing this is from yesterday. The first time I put this on is a heart to represent love. I've had it for months, and yesterday I decided to wear it. And so anything I wear has a meaning. So that's why even this dress, I've worn this dress before. So I wasn't particular about wearing this dress again. All right, I'll be honest with you. I got plenty of clothes, all right? And when ain't enough, I decide something new when I get more clothes, right? I wasn't particular about wearing this dress. But then the Spirit spoke and said, you're going to wear that dress because you need to teach them about patterns. And how even though patterns may look different when they're separated, you can bring them all together and make one thing. And you can make something that's beautiful, something that's tangible, something that's cultural, and something that can be held on to, that can be worn. So this dress I wore because my mother and I still quilt the same way that my grandmother and them quilted, by hand, no sewing machine. And so the patterns that come out at the end, I always got somebody who want to teach me quilt afterwards. It's like, I want that one. No, you can't have it. Okay, that's what I want. No, make another one. You know, because once they see it all come together, then they realize the warmth and the treasure that it is. And that's what it's always about. It's bringing people together and how beautiful that can be when we do it. Yeah. Is that the hand right there? Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Go ahead. I know you were the mama, but you were leaning with the mic toward your mama. That's why I was like, yes, ma'am, first. But go ahead.
What is expected of a Geechee man?
What is expected of a Geechee man? What is expected of Geechee man is expected of just about any man to be a responsible individual, to be a person of honor, to be a person of loyalty, to do what you say you are going to do. Ain't nobody want to hear what you going to do, won't do. Let us see it. All right? You should be a man of action. If you say that you intend to build a house, you start building it. Trust me, others will come and help you build it. But if for 20 years we keep hearing this dream house you got, and you can't wake up from that dream, we got problems. All right? So honestly, we expect our men we always say to be a man. Okay, you're a man or you're a hand. That's what my grandma would say. What is that, a man and a hand? And like, okay, yes ma'am. Okay, because meaning you're not doing nothing. You're sitting around, you're of no use. People don't want that. They don't want you to be trifling. You hear that word a lot in our community. Don't be trifling. Okay, so they want you to actually stand up and do something positive. Yeah, not just busy yourself. Because a lot of people just busy. People, trying to look important. Somebody let me hold your phone. I know, let me hold your phone. Because you had your phone out until I had to tell you stop. Okay. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Anybody want to see this? Anybody want you ain't even looking at me for the pictures you take. I'm right there. You blocking me and you communicating because and nobody want to see all that. We want you to actually, thank you. We want you to actually do something. So usually the men in our community, they are up early. I had a cousin, he said, yeah, because I'm going to be up by 5 o'clock. He said, because my grandma taught me a real man will never let the sun rise with his back to the bed. All right? And he lives by that. And so he's an attorney. But before he goes to his law office that he owns with his practice, he would have already done the stuff that his wife told him that he should have done in the house. But, okay? And if he has to also get ready to go to take his children to school, and for a meeting or something before he goes, he's going to do that. And others who are farmers, they're out there ready. And the sun is coming up. They're ready in the field. They're already working on the tractor or whatever else they got to do, or getting the fertilizer stuff together to go out. So we expect them to work, that's for sure. And countrymen are different than city men, no matter what we are. So, but Gullah Geechee city men can play off a little bit better with the Gullah Geechee countrymen than city men can. As soon as a real city man show up, I just love the way the men are all polite to him. Yeah, man, what's up? And all that. They do all that. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then they walk over here. Where you get that city boy from? They just see it automatically. I don't know if the hands are too soft on the handshake or what. They just know. And they like, he ain't gonna do nothing. He gonna talk. But while he talking, we got work to do. We gotta vote the field. We got food to pull out the field, and then I still got to go to my other job. Yeah, it's a responsibility. Yeah. It ain't about book knowledge. They want to actually know you got common sense. Yeah, you're welcome. Paparazzi, how you doing this evening, Pop?
That's what I like to do, Steve.
I know.
You're beautiful, and I wanted to share who you are and let people who didn't come, because I sent an email to everyone letting them know you were going to be here.
I appreciate it.
My godfather is Gullah, and when I was growing up, he would speak, and I'd say, Daddy, what is, my dad's from Alabama,
Oh,
my
from
dad's
Alabama, okay.
from South Carolina, and I'd say, what's he saying? I don't know what he's saying. And this went on from the time I was 7 up until I was a teenager before I could really understand him. And growing up in New York, people had stereotypes about people moving from the South.
Yes.
Kids from the South that came to the North, they automatically got left back.
Yeah.
And when, my godfather would talk, people thought he was dumb. And they didn't realize that Gullah is a legitimate language.
Exactly.
And I remember, just hearing some of the things like, oh, they would call him Geechee. And I was like, that
In a
sounds-
derogatory
Yeah,
way.
derogatory. I was
Right.
like, well, why did you do that? Because they would call Chinese people Geechees too. And I was like,
Rice
why?
eating people.
Yeah, and
Backward rice eating people.
yeah, and I didn't
That's what they meant
know
by it.
until I got older that Gullah grew rice. And so that's,
Exactly.
people were calling them Geechees. That's why they call Chinese Geechee. But
Right.
just hearing this growing up, and my godfather, he tried to teach me Gullah, and I didn't realize he was speaking
Another language.
another language.
Mhm.
And so I know that, the Gullah, because I knew Mary Washington, because I went to Cornell, and I know that there's a Gullah Bible.
Peculiar people.
There's a
that
Gullah,
will-
there's a Gullah dictionary, and so I just,
Well, actually, it's not a Gullah dictionary, don't bother.
I thought somebody told me there was a dictionary. Well, anyway, I'm just
Yeah,
glad
they're
the
telling me
language is
that,
being
but I
preserved.
saw what they saw it.
Okay.
There's no Gullah dictionary.
So I'm glad that
Language,
there's an
yeah.
effort to preserve the culture and the language.
Absolutely.
Because what I saw growing up was all kinds of negative things
Oh,
for
yeah.
Gullah people.
Right.
And I loved my godfather, and he was being portrayed as backwoods,
Exactly.
so on and so forth.
Mhm. And I'm glad you brought up both the Gullah Bible Project as well as this so-called Gullah Dictionary Project. Again, these are people who are non-Gullah Geechee people trying to make products that they can sell. The American Bible Society did what is called the Gullah Bible. It started off roughly 26 years ago, I believe, at this point in time. It could be a little longer. That they wanted to do a literacy project in the Gullah Geechee community or the Gullah community. They started off with a group of people who were native Gullah speakers being a part of the project. But because they wanted to do what I mentioned about our songs, like Fish Jubilee singers and others have anglicized our songs and so-called popularized the songs, where you took away the meaning and the heart of the songs because you now have them sung some way we don't sing them. This is the same thing started happening with the ABS project. As people who were native speakers of Gullah were not respected when they were saying, this is not how this should be written, this is not how we would say that, they left the project. They weren't going to argue with other people with their own culture. Then a lot of them also died off. Ultimately, that project, if I showed you the original tracks they made, they don't look anything like this final project now, which is supposed to be the New Testament. All right? And we sell it, but I'm glad that what they did was they took my advice. I went to the ABS in New York, and I let them know, y'all are marketing this as the Gullah Bible, but this is not Gullah. The closest you got was Geechee, which is a pidgin or dialect of Gullah. And I said also the phonetic structure, the syntax is wrong. There are words even being used that are English words that don't exist in Gullah. And if you were going to use them, you wouldn't use them where you placed them. But they ended up with 3 people who don't speak Gullah fluently, who were on the ultimate team that created this last project, along with Anglo people who were linguists. So how can you write a project for other people? It's not your culture. It's not your language. You are not fluent in it. But why would you do it? For the same reason I mentioned about the cotton and the indigo and the rice. Because I can sell it. Because the first book that came out with the good news about Jesus Christ for Luke Wright, which was the book of Luke, sold so much. But it's sold to people who are curious about us. It's sold to people like yourself, who their family, the older people, the family might have died off, but they do remember that those older people used to speak that way, and they wanted to have a piece of it. So the thing sold, as they would say, sold like hotcakes. So that's when that line between cultural continuation and cultural exploitation, or cultural preservation and cultural exploitation, is critical. And it's interesting because if you follow us at Gullah Geechee Nation on Facebook or at Gullah Geechee on Twitter, I just posted today our blog, and our blog is GullahGeecheeNation.com, and in your seats, you'll all have the polling system. This flyer, and you'll see our websites are on there, my email is on there and everything. And so, if you go to GullahGeecheeNation.com, you'll see that we just posted Black History, Gullah Geechee, misrepresentation, miseducation, and exploitation. And it's a series of my Gullah Geechee Rhythm Radio shows, because there's a lot of marketing of things now being called Gullah Geechee that's not really Gullah Geechee, but it's palatable for the public to buy.
And one of the things, one of the things, the Smithsonian years ago did an exhibit on the Gullah, and they had said that the Gullah traced their roots back to Sierra Leone.
That's why you heard that.
Yeah. So I just would like you to clarify this. It's something about the Gullah had, the language that the Gullah speak is similar to the dialect that the Bajans speak.
Right.
And then they also traced it back to Sierra Leone.
I'm gonna help you out. First of all, and I always tell people this, if you get a map of Africa today, you know full well, just using again, as I said to young man, common sense. Sierra Leone looked this here big. You didn't get millions of Africans from that one country and bring them nowhere. You would have depopulated the whole place. In this book, The Legacy of Igbo Land and Gullah Roots of African American Culture, to answer that question, we have a chart, we have a map that shows you the places from the Senegambia to Angola that Gullah Geechees came from. The different ethnic groups that make up Gullah Geechees, they were not all from Sierra Leone. All right, love my family in Salone, but we ain't all from there. That was pushed and promoted because one man was trying to make a career, because he at that time lived in Sierra Leone. He used to be a Peace Corps worker there, and he now had a contract with the government of Sierra Leone, and wanted a contract which he ultimately got with the National Park Service here. So they started promoting it. That's why as soon as you said Smithsonian, I said, oh God, because the Smithsonian is well known for reinterpreting things, okay, and not necessarily to the liking of the people whose story they're reinterpreting. I am praying that because Lonnie Bunch is in charge of the National Museum of African American History and Culture that'll open in September on the mall, that we have better representation. Because there are a lot of Gullah Geechee artifacts, my books, and other things that are going to be part of that division of the Smithsonian, which will be the last one built on the mall. I'm praying it'll be better. But we are building the International African American Museum in Charleston ourselves. So I can already tell you, once again, what I said earlier, don't go where looking for the truth, right? Don't go to museums. That was exactly why I said that, because the museum is up to whoever curates. I've actually had curators come and apologize to me because I did the keynote address to open up something that was supposed to be Gullah that they curated. And I've had several people say to me, I wish I had spoken to you because it just kind of fell in my lap to curate it. Not that they wanted to or that they knew the topic. So they pulled from whatever was already popular or what was just in the archives of their museum. No insult to you. Because we got a few museum curators in here. But they can tell you what the process is for curating. But this book would help you. Yeah, really enlighten. And so, yeah, and I've done work. I've actually consulted for the Smithsonian. I've spoken there many times too. Solar crowds, but yeah, it's political. What do you expect? It's Washington. Yeah.
So I have 2 questions.
You have 5 questions. Stop story answering. No, go ahead.
I whittled it down to 2.
Okay.
First, I'm glad that you mentioned how Geechee is not fully Gullah.
Right.
Because
Originally.
I keep explaining to my kids, because I learned when I was 6.
Mhm.
And like I told you, I thought it was a play language. I thought it was something my cousins did.
Yeah.
Until one day we were all sitting around Grandma's table talking about boys.
Mm.
And Grandma's like, you think I don't know what you're saying?
Mm.
You know that because I know that.
Mm-hmm.
And she told us everything that we said. And I was shocked.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got older, a doctor told me. I just came from a meeting and he told me that it was Geechee.
Okay.
And I was like, what is that? So I researched it myself.
Right.
My grandparents and my uncles and them, for some reason, they just didn't want to talk about the history. And
Because
then-
of the pain she mentioned earlier.
And then I
of
went to
people speaking of it in derogatory.
Yes, and then I went to a Native American powwow, also Native American, and medicine man, Cherokee Native medicine man, he says to me, don't, because I said I made the decision today, I'm never going to speak it again because it's not a real language. And he said, yes, it is. And then I spoke to him and he understood me. And he said, don't ever give it up, you know, teach it to your kids. So I spoke it even more
Yes.
to my children.
Right.
My question is though, when did Geechee come out of Gullah? Like, because the way you speak, like I understand Gullah, I understand it very well.
Because they're grandma. Right.
But Geechee sounds different.
Yes, it does.
The way he just messes it up. He doesn't enunciate.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But
How did it evolve out? And
yeah,
when?
because what we speak
Yeah.
is so watered down, and it's so mixed.
Mixed, yeah. What happened is that when Gullah people started to engage with American English-speaking people, because of course I go to England, darling, the queen there doesn't believe we speak English anyway. So American English speakers and Elizabethan English speakers early on, what tended to happen was now they needed to find a bridge between the two languages. And so that's when Geechee evolved. When we started getting bridges to the Sea Islands in the 1930s and 1940s, and we still have islands that do not have bridges to this day, that's when more of the evolution of Geechee took place. Also, the migration of Geechee came with the Great Migration, okay? And so you find, Geechee Dam, and you can go back to things like a soldier story, and you can see the dynamics of the clash just literally acted out between those who were coming from the South, who were already up here ahead of you, maybe a year or two ahead of you, so now they don't want you bringing that country stuff up here. Okay, because people don't know we all from the country, no. Okay, so then again, you got a different evolution. Because now when people were away from large groups of everyone speaking, then you start using even more loan words from American English, right? Because you're more influenced, right, by the people around you all the time.
Yes, because
Yeah.
Geechee now, the Geechee that, I know that if I go to see my family
Yes.
down in
Yes,
South
that's
Carolina,
right.
Edisto,
Right.
not only will there be some Native American dialect mixed in,
Right.
because we have some of that mixed in, what I
Absolutely.
learned when I was little is Native American dialect.
Right.
But there's also the European languages that we have mixed in with the Geechee,
Right.
because up here, up north, that's what was around us.
Around.
Our immediate family, we had the Native Americans, we had the European, and then the Gullah.
Right. And all together.
And so when I hear you speak, like, I love it because I can't speak Gullah. I speak
Well, you
Dutch.
speak Geechee, but it's okay though.
Yeah.
I still love you. But yes, your story is not unique.
Oh, thank you.
It's not unique at all. Your story is a constant story. Her story is a constant story, especially when I'm going to the Gulf. People are always saying, well, they call it Geechee. I'm like, because many people in Alabama, Mississippi, and those that are in Louisiana, Texas, Mexico, and Oklahoma are actually Gullah Geechees that got forcibly moved westward right before the U.S. Civil War. And so, once again, patterns. The pattern was, even if you move us, we're going to recreate our culture here. If you move us again, we're still going to recreate our culture here. So even when I did this book, there's a section in here where there are quotes from different people. And there's a set of quotes from Pennsylvania, because there was a whole Gullah Geechee enclave that formed in this part of Pennsylvania right outside of Pittsburgh. And there's now Queen Quet there in Pittsburgh, all right? But they would keep their Geechee alive amongst themselves. But they knew if anybody else came in the block, in the neighborhood, they acted like, everybody else. But when the other folks weren't there, they would still communicate as much as possible, right? And of course, if somebody was going home, hey, talk to my mom and them, send me some fish back up here, tell them I need some yellow grits or whatever, yeah, I bring all that. You see, so yes, definitely. I am very pleased because I kept praying, I kept meditating, I knew I was going to get that question. I didn't expect it to come from you. But before I ever got, I know, right? But for some reason, I knew before I got here I was going to get that question tonight. But also, it is good to be here and have people who have Gullah Geechee ancestry actually come out. Because a lot of times, people would read how it's coming. But even if they came, they wouldn't sit in the audience and tell people that they had Gullah Geechee ancestry or any connection. They'll wait till they can tell everybody to leave and talk to me at the table. Every city I go to, they'll do that. And they would just wait till the end and say, oh, I just want to tell you black people from Anastou, my people from Beaufort, my people from so, but they wouldn't dare in the public audience say it. So it's a blessing, you know, and this being what month? What month is this? Black History Month. I appreciate you making Black history by doing that, by speaking up here at Union. And definitely it's a blessing to be at Union and to hear that this school is one that focuses on liberal arts and engineering as two of the major majors, given the fact that I graduated from a liberal arts college with honors, I must say, as well as the fact that I studied engineering and had a number of colleges try to get me to come to those schools. And I always tell people I graduated ultimately with a computer science and mathematics degree. And whenever I look at a Carolina Gold rice field, I see the engineering in it. I see the science in it. And to be in a place, in a space like this, is a blessing for me. Because it says that no matter where we go, we still take with us who we are. And that there is still that journey that we're all on, but that there's enough of that seed implanted that there'll be more fruit to grow for the next generation. Even up here in the cold in the Adirondack area. Let's thank for all of you to be here tonight. I do have this book and others on the table, along with CDs and DVDs that are for sale. And so all of the funds from these go back to the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition, which I founded, which anyone can be a member of. And you see the little forms that are on your seat. So please take the forms, take the flyers with you, come down where we are. It is warmer, and so that you can enjoy the culture firsthand. But I want to definitely thank Caleb because he's been an outstanding host all through the time, making sure everything got done for me to get here. I want to thank you, director here, who's going to come. She's trying to hide behind suitcase and come along with me down there. But we'll definitely probably see some pictures go up with us on the water down there. And definitely I'd love to have the same happen with everyone else. So as we always say, Hunter must take care of the roof and heal the tree. So I pray tonight that I've given you some tools to dig a little bit deeper, not only into Gullah Geechee culture, but into cultural continuation, all the different communities that you represent. So thank you, Hunter Children, for coming out.